All right, here we go.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I would like to call the MPO Policy Committee meeting to order and remind you that the meeting is being live streamed. Members, in order for the online attendees to hear you, please make sure you unmute your microphone when speaking. Please identify yourself when making or sending a motion so that us here can capture who is making the motion. For those attending in person, please complete the sign-in sheet located in the hallway before you leave. If you wish to make a public comment, please fill out the public comment card and return it to a staff member rather. For those participating via Zoom, please keep your microphone muted unless you are called upon to speak when appropriate on the agenda. We will request comment from those online, and you can indicate your desire to speak via the chat box. The staff is monitoring Zoom and will recognize you when it is your time to speak. And with that, Aaron, please call the roll.
Thank you. I'll call the agency, and if you could identify yourself, please. IDOT,
Here.
CDOT.
Here, Jeff Shriver, alternate for Commissioner Carney.
Thank you. CMAP Beal. CMAP Brawley. Class 1 Railroads. Cook County.
Jesse Hume, alternate.
Thank you. Council of Mayors. Thank you. CTA.
Karen Bader, alternate.
Thank you. DuPage County. FHWA.
John Paul Diplo, alternate.
Thank you. FTA.
Mark Kane, alternate.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority.
Here.
Kane County.
Tom Rickard, alternate.
Thank you. Kendall County. Lake County.
Kevin Carrier, alternate.
McHenry County.
Scott Hennings, alternate.
Metra.
Here.
Thank you. Pace.
Here.
RTA.
Yeah.
Will County. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. A request will receive from Melinda Mesker of PACE to participate remotely in this meeting. And in compliance with the Open Meeting Act, it does require a majority vote on this body by voice vote. So can I get a motion to approve virtual participation, please?
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The vote passes.
Great. We will mark you present, Melinda, and let you continue to vote on matters of the committee.
Thank you. On agenda item 2, there are no changes to the agenda, but however, I get a couple of announcements to make on my end. A lot of you know Steve Trivia. He's the chief engineer for the department. He had made an announcement, and he will be the transportation lead for DuPage County. He will be leaving the department in late July. I will surely miss him because he's been a great help over 30-some years with the department and experience in all facets of transportation, so to speak, and a lot of you have dealt with him. He's a great addition to DuPage County for sure. With that, we are obviously going to be looking for a replacement, and we hopefully would like to announce that as soon as, at the time Steve leaves, so not way before he leaves. But with that, tomorrow afternoon, the governor will be announcing the latest multi-year program. And he's going to announce it, I think, in the village of McCook area. It's going to be a historic one. even better than last year. I'm going to leave it there because all the numbers and whatnot are for the governors to announce. So it should be a good day if you get a chance. Follow up. I think it is a stream live too. So with that agenda, item 3 is for approval of the minute, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, and this is for the March 14th, 2024 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the March 14th, 2024 meeting minutes, please? Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. We will move into agenda item 4 with CMAP announcement, and we will start with the executive director report.
Well, thank you and welcome. Nice to have you all in the room this morning. It looked like it was gonna be cloudy and rainy. We got a little bit of sun before maybe a rainy afternoon, but happy to have you here. A couple updates from our end here. Since we last met, CMAP updated our 2020 land use inventory, which identifies 50 different land categories in northeastern Illinois. The inventory classifies all properties in the region to residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural, and other categories. We know that you all find this data useful to understand how we use and develop land and how that's changed over time. For example, you're able to sort of look at and analyze the success of local development policies and sort of thinking about how those policies have influenced infill and transit-oriented development. And I think what's most powerful about this data is that it does go back to 1990. So I just wanted to highlight that's available for use and download on the CMAP website. Also this morning, I wanted to share with you a little bit about the 290 Blue Line Corridor project update. So since the last time we met, CMAP and the USDOT Build America Bureau held a technical assistance workshop here at our office with our partners IDOT and CTA on April 4th and 5th. The partners met to discuss challenges and identified opportunities for collaboration and innovation and develop a shared vision for this continued progress along a critical corridor in our region. This work does build on the joint statement of understanding that we have between the project partners, between CTA, between IDOT and CMAP here. And I think one other exciting development that I have to share with you all this morning is that we do have an RFP posted for our Corridor Development Program Office consultant support services to this work. We really view this as an opportunity for us to think about that collaboration, that coordination that needs to happen on a project that is just as complex as any that we have in the region here. And so thinking about what that story is, what that vision is, and how we're going to attack the program and get this project moving in a meaningful way. And so I'm thankful to the secretary, also to CTA for their support and their team's efforts to get this procurement up and posted. Again, we know how important it is that goods and people continue to move through the 290 corridor, and that we really think about this as an opportunity to reinvigorate the west side of the city of Chicago, think about the safety concerns, modernizing, and really just add value, considerable value that the transit along that corridor already brings to the corridor itself. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that. I think that's a major milestone for us, and then look forward to more to come on that. Another thing that I wanted to talk with you all about here is creating a comprehensive climate action plan. We continue our regional climate initiatives by working on the comprehensive climate action plan for Chicago, for the Chicago MSA. So a little bit bigger than the CMAP region. We are partnering with the Northwestern Indiana Regional Planning Commission on this, as well as a number of state partners and the US EPA. The goal here is to identify solutions to address all of the significant greenhouse gas sources and sinks, and develop some strategies to reduce emissions by 2050 to net zero. Again, this climate action plan will take about 15 months. It began last month. We had our first kickoff steering committee earlier this week. And in July, we will start convening stakeholder groups to talk about very specific sources of greenhouse gases. So buildings, energy, transportation, stuff that goes a little bit beyond our expertise here. So we have spent a lot of time really engaging folks in sectors that will be helpful to us identifying these solutions here. So this approach will make sure that we have broad representation from across the region. We also recognize that transit has a big role to play in reducing greenhouse gases across the region as well. So more to come. We'll bring more on that to you in the future. And then we will have a little bit longer legislative highlight here at the end of our meeting, but I did want to mention that at the outset, the Regional Planning Act Modernization Bill did pass. This bill passed both chambers. We will keep you apprised once it passes and is signed by the governor here. But we were successful in really amending our operations, our ability to keep the agency operations moving on the board side of our work here. So we were not successful in our Appropriations Act ask this session here. The intergovernmental team has been continuing to discuss opportunities for us to go back to the state and talk about how we move forward with a bill to fund the other areas of work that we are mandated to do in the Regional Planning Act. So thank you to those of you who have been helpful for that conversation. I know that, you know, we would love to be able to work on other issues that your counties and communities are dealing with. And then a highlight on our technical assistance awards. Yesterday, we announced we are accepting 30 projects, technical assistance projects across the region. We partner annually with the RTA to offer a single application to offer planning and implementation assistance, offering our interagency expertise and really leveraging opportunities to think about things like transit-oriented development and building local government capacity here. We received 122 applications from 96 different applicants, but we are excited, I think, especially recognizing that this body has been well aware of our Americans with Disabilities Act program. We are excited to announce that we've awarded a number of projects that will help start developing transition plans and really help communities get into compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we are excited about getting those projects kicked off here. I think that is it on my end. I'm happy to answer any questions. Great. Hearing none, I think we can move on.
Thank you, Erin. Moving on to agenda item 402, that is the CMAP board update. And that will be Leanne Redden, please.
Thank you. Quite a bit we had 3 board meetings since the MPO last met, so I'll run through a couple of things that have been discussed since then, so you're up to speed. There was approved updates to the CMAP board bylaws, in addition to some other grammatical modifications from chairman to chair, et cetera, a few things like that. The amendments to the bylaws, though, included a clarification on that the board and its committees may use a consent agenda to transact business, clarification of long-standing practice that members of the executive committee would be comprised of 2 members of each of the city, Chicago, Cook, and Collier counties, modifications to the powers of the executive committee that would allow them to act on grant agreements, intergovernmental agreements, and approve or amend contracts within certain limitations, in certain circumstances when the board is, and also when the board is unable to meet within a given period. It does exclude the executive director's contract. Also, there was clarification of the power of the executive director that would tie limitations to the simplified acquisition threshold or a maximum contract authority to limits defined by this in the state statutes. Also received overviews at that meeting on the 2026 Regional Transportation Plan and the Regional Vision. The board also met on May 8th, 2024. At that meeting, the board acted on the executive director's performance review and approved a 5-year contract renewal. The FY 2023 financial audit was received and filed, and there were 2 presentations of CMAP's community outreach to engage and empower that were provided to the full board. And one of those presentations was related to the Community Alliance on Regional Equity, and the second was about participatory budgeting. At the June 12 meeting, so just yesterday, several of those items are actually on today's agenda as well here. The board received an update on the memorandum of understanding between CMAP board and the MPO policy committee, as we'll discuss in a bit. And the board also received presentations on the regional transportation plan and the speed management report. That concludes the summary of the 3 meetings.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? Leon? Hearing none, and then moving into item 403, and that's Council of Mayors Executive Committee report. Mayor Shelton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The Council of Mayors Executive Committee last met on March 26, 2024. At that meeting, CMAP staff sought early consultation with the mayors on several matters that are on our agenda today. The mayors provided early input to the CMAP staff on the development of the agency strategy for the social economic forecast and for the regional transportation plan, and CMAP's plan for the 6-county transportation safety program. You'll hear good updates about both of those items at today's meeting. Since May, the CMAP staff has begun transitioning the Council of Mayors Executive Committee to a new CMAP staff support and use the opportunity to talk to members about refreshed vision for the Executive Committee. The mayors are planning liaisons have provided great ideas for how the council's agendas can provide solid value to members and use the local expertise of mayors to enrich CMAP's work. Some of the ideas the mayors have included is a refresher on the complex system of transportation infrastructure funding and the insights into IDOT processes. And another one is how cities go about naming the streets within their communities. And that's got some very interesting ideas behind it, and we're going to put together a program on how names are chosen for streets in the area. So a lot to talk about. Yeah, even the seasoned mayors are telling us that they will look forward to these discussions. The executive committee is next scheduled to meet on August 13th, 2024, here in this room. So that's my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any comments, any questions for the mayor? Well, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5. All the items under this agenda item are for approval, so that you know. We'll start with 501, and that is the onto 2050, 2023, 2028, 2029, rather, TIP approval. And with that, the senior program analyst, Russell.
Actually, I think it's for 5.01, which is.
I intentionally skip your last name, but I just said Russell.
Oh, that's fine. That's perfect.
Thank you.
Included in your packet today is the onto 2050, 2024 to 2028 TIP conformity amendment 24-08. As you may know, the CMAP region is a non-attainment area for ozone. Thus, we are required under the Clean Air Act to demonstrate that projects in the TIP conform to the motor vehicle emissions budget for our area through a regional emissions analysis. Specifically, projects in the TIP subject to air quality analysis requirements demonstrate, when modeled, that the region does not exceed our motor vehicle emissions budget, as shown near the end of the memo in your packet. The conformity analysis before you was done using EPA MOVES 3 model. I bring that up just because the US EPA has released a new MOVES model, MOVES 4. CMAP has until August of 2025 to begin using this model for its emissions modeling. However, we already started the process for switching to a new model and anticipate using it in the next conformity analysis this fall, about a year ahead of schedule. US EPA MOVES 4 has stated, the US EPA has stated that MOVES 4 is the best tool for estimating greenhouse gases from on-road and non-road vehicles. MOVES 4 also takes into account the impacts of new regulations and rules such as the heavy-duty low NOx rule for model years 2027 and later, and the light-duty greenhouse gas rules for model years 2023 and later. MOVES 4 adds the ability to model heavy-duty battery electric vehicles and fuel cell vehicles, as well as CNG long-haul combination trucks, and it improves the modeling of light-duty EVs. So basically, the reason I'm telling you this is we'll be able to model EVs a lot more robustly than what we currently are able to do, and you will see that reflected in future conformity analysis. The memo and the projects on the conformity amendment were released for a 30-day public comment period during which one comment was received. However, it was not related to any of the projects on the conformity amendment or the emissions modeling process. CMAP staff has responded to the commentator and nothing further needs to be done. The amendment was also discussed at the Tier 2 interagency consultation meeting in May and recently at the Transportation Committee meeting also in May. At this time, CMAP staff requests approval of the ONTO 2050, 2024 to 2028 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment 24-08 as presented. And I can answer any questions if there are any at this time. Perfect.
Okay. Then, hearing none, can I get a motion to approve the on to 2050/2023, 2029 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment, right?
I think it is, it is 2028 for this one.
Is it?
It's the current TIP is 2024 to 2028, yes.
Sorry,
So,
the next,
Shoki
the
was-
next one is.
The next one is going to be different years, but this one is
it's
24 to 28.
2024 into 20?
To 28.
Okay,
We're good.
all right,
Shoki will so make that motion.
all right, thank you. Second,
Hassan.
and once again, is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. Agenda item 502 is for Comodops. We'll be presenting the STB local program in the TIP. So.
Good
Kama,
morning. Thank you, Secretary. And sorry about the confusion
Not
about
a
the two
problem.
5-year programs. As detailed in the memo in your packet, it's been a busy year of program development at the 11 sub-regional councils as well as at CDOT. Each of the councils and CDOT has held individual calls for projects to be funded in federal fiscal years 2025 through 2029 with their local allocations of STP funds. In response to these calls, more than 300 applications were received from over 140 local agencies, requesting nearly $560 million from the councils of mayors. Additionally, CDOT considered federal funding for more than 40 projects valued at over $1.6 billion. Project applications were scored according to each subregion's methodology, and the resulting programs of projects were available for public comment throughout the spring months. The final council and CDOT programs allocate approximately $326 million in federal STP funding over the next 5 fiscal years for 149 new locally sponsored projects, and that's in addition to the 209 projects that are continuing from prior programming cycles. The total federal STP local funding allocated for new and continuing projects over the next 5 years is about $894 million. The breakdown of that by the council and federal fiscal year is shown in the packet memo. These local programs continue to focus investments on the construction phases of projects. About 80% of the new projects, using about 62% of the funding, are for road maintenance and modernization. Although I'm happy to say that very few of these projects are just standalone street resurfacing. Instead, the local programs are continuing to invest in projects that not only maintain the existing system, but also improve safety, add to, enhance, or repair the bicycle and pedestrian networks, increase accessibility for all through ADA improvements, incorporate green infrastructure into projects, and address the vulnerability of our transportation system to our changing climate. In addition to roadway projects, 14% of the new program funding is allocated for transit station or stop improvements, and more than 5% of the new projects are for bicycle and pedestrian facilities. The councils are also continuing to take advantage of state and regional policies to support disadvantaged communities by replacing the required local match on 40 new projects with about $3.8 million in federal funds leveraged through the use of toll credits. The local programs were incorporated into the series of 12 TIP changes that are linked in your agenda memo today. These amendments were presented to the Transportation Committee at their May 31st meeting, and that committee is recommending your approval today.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the 2025, 2029 STP local program in the TIP? Thank you. Second,
Second, Shelkey.
is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. The motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to agenda item 503. Is Russell again, that, it's not Russell, right? Do I get the same?
No, I know. You know what? Apologies. That's our error. It's Doug.
So.
Yep.
Doug, you don't look anything like Russell, but Doug will be presenting the FTA SUP area allocation.
Good morning. Doug Ferguson, he, him. I'm a senior analyst with the Transportation Programming Group here at CMAP. Included in your meeting materials today are two federally required cooperative agreements with CMAP's MPO neighbors, the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission and the Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission. The agreements lay out how the neighboring regions will organize our planning efforts for urbanized areas that cross state lines, especially concerning federal performance measures, the shared federal funding, and how to resolve planning differences. The last time the agreements were ratified were 2018 and 2016 respectively. The agreements largely stayed the same with only some minor corrections to the geographies and the addition of more descriptive language. So at this time, CMAP staff requests MPO Policy Committee approval for the cooperative agreement for coordination of land use and transportation planning for the Round Lake Beach, McHenry, Grays Lake, Illinois, Wisconsin urbanized area. I think we jumped ahead.
Yeah,
didn't we?
can I just ask,
Sorry. that
are we
was
doing
my bad.
5.03 or 5.04?
Yep, no, hold on. We skipped ahead. So this is 5.04. This is 5.04. So if the board doesn't mind here, we'll do 5.04 and come back to 5.03.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking for a motion?
Yes.
I'll make the motion that we approve.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you. Second,
Shelkey was second.
any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Yeah, so
If we could we also take 5.5? Because I don't have anything additional.
Okay,
sure.
sure.
It's the next 5.5 is the cooperative agreement for Chicago, Gary, Lake County, Illinois, Indiana, urbanized area.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
No, there's no further,
Information in the packet, right?
Right,
So moved.
right.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay.
All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The motion carries.
5.05. So we are going back to 5.03
5.03
here,
please,
Russell
yes.
Krowiak.
Yep.
Sorry about that. A little ad-libbing here. All right. So we're back to 5.03. Annually, FTA transit formula funding is provided to the Chicago and Indiana and Round Lake Beach, Wisconsin urbanized areas. This funding is then sub-allocated between the RTA, NERC, and the RTA in Sewer Pack as shown in Table 1 that's included in your packet. The vast majority of the funding typically goes to the RTA area, and that is again the case this year with nearly 96% of the funding shown in Table 1 going to the RTA. The RTA has signed letters of understanding with both NERC and Sewer Pack to sub-allocate these funds, and the RTA board approved the sub-allocation at their May board meeting. At this time, staff requests approval, recommending the sub-area allocations between Northwest Indiana and Northeast Illinois and Southeastern Wisconsin and Northeastern Illinois by the MPO Policy Committee. I will take any questions if there are any at this time.
So can I get a motion to approve? There are no questions. Second,
Second by Shelkey.
all in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Back to camera.
Let's- let's-
5.06.
Yes, indeed. 5.06 is resolution reaffirming the metropolitan planning area MPA boundary. So Cameron,
All right, sorry about that confusion.
not a problem.
We were drawing straws over who was going to present and got ourselves all confused. All right, good morning again. In accordance with federal metropolitan planning requirements, after each federal census, MPOs are required to review the metropolitan planning area, known as the MPA, which is the area in which the metropolitan planning process must be carried out. This review is done in the context of changes to urbanized areas as a result of the census. Following the 2020 census, IDOT reviewed the urbanized areas throughout the state and found that there were no changes to the urbanized areas in northeastern Illinois that would warrant a modification to CMAP's MPA, which encompasses the entirety of Cook, DuPage, King, Kendall, Lake, McHenry, and Will counties, as well as Osable Township in Grundy County and Sandwich and Salmonock Townships in DeKalb County, which is illustrated on the map in your packet. Therefore, staff is today requesting your approval of the attached resolution to be transmitted to the governor for concurrence that affirms our existing metropolitan planning area boundary has not changed.
Thank you, Cameron. Can I get a motion to approve the resolution, please? Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Moving on into agenda item 6. 601, so that each year, the chair of the MPO committee appoints a nominating committee to bring forward a name or names for the vice chair of the MPO for the following year. This year, I'm appointing the following to meet before our next regularly scheduled meeting in the fall. Frank Bell to represent the Regional Planning Agency, RTA to represent the Public Transportation Agency, Mayor Jeff Shelkey to represent municipal government, CDOT represent highway or roads or road transportation, and McHenry to represent the counties. So this agenda item does not require a vote and it's only for information.
And I'll just say we'll follow up over the summer to coordinate a meeting time.
Agenda item 602 is for Aaron Alaman. We'll be discussing the memorandum of understanding between the CMAP board and the MPO policy committee.
Thank you. Included in your packet is the copy of the MOU between the CMAP board and the MPO policy committee meeting. At this time, staff is not recommending any changes, but for those of you who are new, this is a long-standing agreement between these bodies when CMAP was created from NIPSI and CATS that we do so in the spirit of collaboration and coordination, recognizing that we both have a state role and a federal role and mandate to participate in, that it's important that we think about the intersection between the land use and transportation systems and everything else that comes along with that. So we are including it in your packet this month as an informational item, and we would ask that if there's any conversation, questions, thoughts, you get back to us on that. But our goal is to approve this by both bodies in our joint October meeting in the fall. Any questions?
One question, has anything changed from previous MOUs?
So there have been some strategic changes over the years, but the staff reviewed it and really it still embodies the spirit of the requirement for the MOU. It still talks about the bodies and the working groups and committees that we have in a way that we think reflects what we're doing now. So, hence we're not recommending any changes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Agenda item 603, that's the Regional Transportation Plan, RTP update. And for that, we'll have Alex Ball, I believe, and then Julie Reschke. Did I say that right?
Yes, you
Yeah,
did.
thank
And
you.
while Alex gets situated here, This update is sort of under the header of the 2026 Regional Transportation Plan, which also we lovingly refer to as the RTP that's currently in development here. So just as a reminder, this is our long-range transportation vision for the region that outlines goals and objectives and strategies and investment priorities. You'll have two presentations during this agenda item. First, Alex is going to talk about the regional socioeconomic forecast, which predicts jobs, population, and really looks at the economic landscape that we could be seeing here now and into the future to 2050. The forecast is federally required, and it really helps us inform the transportation investment strategies and decisions that we make in the 2050 plan here. And so then Julie will follow up and talk a little bit about where the team is at in terms of some research of goals and best practices for transportation plans from across the country and also in the region here. So with that, Alex.
All right, thank you. So yeah, my name is Alex Balls, Senior Research Analyst with the RAP Division, he, him, and I am the Project Manager for the Regional Socioeconomic Forecast. So as Aaron mentioned, the forecast is a federal requirement for MPOs. We need to anticipate transportation and land use conditions to at least a 20-year planning horizon. As many of you are aware, the current regional transportation plan will go through the year 2050. While all MPOs do a forecast, there are slightly different mechanisms for doing it, but they all have two general components. The first is a regional forecast. This looks at demographic and economic trends for the region as a whole, 7 counties. And then there is a local forecast that looks kind of more at the conditions on the ground that reflects current knowledge, policy considerations such as zoning, and stakeholder input. It's important to know that the local forecast is basically an allocation of the regional forecast. And so the regional totals are given to the local forecast to distribute kind of throughout the region. This presentation will focus on the regional forecast, which we recently completed a draft, and the local forecast is still in the process of development. Next slide. So there'll be a larger update about the regional transportation plan after this. But I wanted to highlight some of the uses of the forecast in the regional transportation plan. One of those is in the financial plan. Knowing how many people and jobs we can expect in the region gives us a sense of how much money we have to invest. It's also used in a scenario planning exercise to understand different possible futures we might see in the region. We work very closely with the travel modeling team, both in the development of the forecast, and they use the forecast to evaluate projects. And it's also a tool for stakeholder engagement, helping us understand or work with different people to understand where the region is headed and what we might want to do about that. Next slide. So population change in the region is made up of 3 major components. The first being the number of people born, the second being the number of people that die, and the third being the number of people that move in or out of the region. Our forecast models all of these separately to get a grand total of people we're expecting in the region. There also is a jobs forecast projecting the number of jobs in the region. As you can see, the migration and jobs are some of the hardest things to estimate because there's a lot of different inputs that impact how that might play out in the next 30 years or so. Slide. So want to talk a little bit about the data that goes into the forecast. We look at some of the historic birth rates and mortality rates in the region. Our baseline for this is kind of pre-COVID years because we know that data can be a bit wonky. And we look at kind of how our birth and mortality rates compare to the country as a whole. We also use projections by a lot of different agencies that kind of specialize in this type of forecasting. So we purchase a jobs forecast from Moody's Analytics that I'll give a little bit more information on shortly, but is a major driver of some of the population and jobs in the region. We use economic data and projections from the Congressional Budget Office to try to turn those jobs projections into population projections. So that includes things like the unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate. And we also use demographic projections provided by the census, who project the, for example, fertility rate and mortality rate at the national level. And we kind of incorporate those with the historical data to get an understanding of what we might expect for our region. To give a little bit more of an overview on this jobs forecast, I know there are there's some disagreement about some of the recent census numbers for the region, and we just wanted to highlight that there are a lot of different inputs into this jobs forecast beyond that. You can see some of those listed here, but the economic forecast has over 200 different inputs, And this is part of the reason we rely on kind of this consultant that specializes in this, Moody's, because they have a much better understanding of how all of these complicated economic factors might play out in our region. So we want to give a little bit of context and then share the draft forecast. So nationally, the US population is still growing, but that rate of growth has been slowing down. 2019, 2020, and 2021 all saw 100-year lows in growth rate. Specifically in 2021, the US had a population increase of less than 1 million for the first time in over a century. The US Census projects the US population every 5 years or so. They released their most recent projection last fall, and notably, it was much lower than the projection they had provided previously in 2017. Specifically for our horizon year of 2050, the national projection for population was 28 million fewer in the most recent census forecast when compared to the previous one. Additionally, kind of beyond our horizon year, for the first time ever, the census has projected that in 2080, the US population will start to decline. Next slide. So this graph shows kind of our current draft forecast. So the blue bars show that the measured population for the region by the Census Bureau, and the green bars show the CMAP population forecasts over time, with the darker green bar on the far left showing the 2018 forecast, and then the lighter green bar on the far right showing our most recent draft forecast that we just produced. I'll pause for a second for people to kind of digest this graph. So some of the major takeaways, we go back. Some of the major takeaways from this graph are that the region is still projected to grow, but that rate of growth is expected to be lower than some of our previous forecasts. There are a few reasons for this, one being that the birth rate had decreased a lot in the 2008 Great Recession, and it hasn't ever really recovered since then. And the farther away we get from that, the more certainty we have that that birth rate will probably stay lower. We're also seeing lower job growth in the forecast that we purchased from Moody's. That's due to a number of factors, but part of that is the lower census projections that we mentioned earlier. And I did want to highlight, and we'll talk about this more shortly, that migration is going to be a big factor in the level of growth for the region going forward. In the past few years, we've had negative domestic migration, so people moving out of the region to other parts of the US, but that has been partly offset by positive international migration, people moving here from abroad. Next slide. So kind of looking under the hood at some of the demographic trends that we want to be looking out for. This graph shows the number of people at the national level that are under 18 compared to those that are over 65. By 2030, coming up, they expect that the number of people over 65 will outnumber youth for the first time in kind of recorded US history. This aging population has a lot of implications for planning. We can't highlight all of them now, but things like school enrollment and travel behavior are expected to change as the population ages. Next slide. We also want to highlight kind of the components of growth that the census is forecasting. And so the blue bar on this graph shows natural change, so that it's just the number of births minus the number of deaths, which is essentially what the population change would be if there was no migration. In 2038, the US is expected to have more deaths than births, which means that absent migration, the population would start declining. However, as you can see, this green bar shows the expected level of migration, which is expected to be relatively constant over time, which is why in our horizon year, the population continues to projected to be growing, though at a slower rate. Slide. So this slide shows the only other public forecast of the region that we are aware of, which is the Illinois Department of Public Health. In 2019, they produced a forecast through 2030 at the county level for every county in the state. Some of the things to highlight from that forecast is they expect the population in the state of Illinois and Cook County to decrease, while they expect an increase in the collar counties. You can see the growth rates here between 2000 and 2010, the region grew by about 3.5%. Between 2010 and 2020, that was almost halved. And the total forecast, or the state forecast, aligns with the CMAP forecast and expecting growth, but growth at a slower rate than we have seen previously. We have also been in conversation with peer MPOs, both kind of individual conversations and kind of my partner in this project that runs the local forecast is on the AMPO forecasting leadership group. And most MPOs, as you can see on this graph, are projecting a positive rate of growth, but a slowing rate of growth. New York is the only MPO that is predicting a higher rate of growth going forward than they saw in the last decade. And there are some MPOs that are predicting no growth or a decrease in population. You can see that Los Angeles population is expected to decline, although I'll note those forecasts are done at the state level by the Department of Finance. And in the CMAP region, we're expecting growth to be slightly lower than the 2010 to 2020, but still somewhat positive. So I want to highlight some of our next steps here. As mentioned, this was a draft forecast. We're still in the process of reviewing the results, doing stakeholder engagement. And I want to note that it definitely will change because some of the inputs will get updated by the time we finalize this. So both some of the jobs forecast and some of the economic projections by the Congressional Budget Office. We're in the process of developing our local forecast with our consultant Urban Sim. Want to highlight two of our main stakeholders that we're trying to engage with during this process, and that's the local advisory group, which is people that kind of work with the forecast at the local level, that have an understanding of how it might impact their community and have an understanding of some of the changes happening on the ground in their community. And secondly, a technical advisory group. So this has experts in demographics and forecasting from around the Midwest to kind of make sure that our methodology is sound and that our assumptions make sense. And we'll also be having the vision planning process with scenario planning, thinking about the driving forces that might be changing in the region, and thinking about scenarios or policies we might want to adopt that could change the outcome if we don't like where we're headed. This is just briefly to highlight some of the members of the technical advisory group. I'll particularly point out Zach Kennedy, who is the Illinois State Data Center lead that works very closely with the census, and the Illinois State demographer who produces those forecasts that we were talking about on a previous slide, is also a part of this group, and we're working with him to understand kind of the trends in the region. This is highlighting some of the members of our local advisory group. We have asked each council of government and council of mayors to nominate a member. Although not all of them have, so if you don't see your region represented here, please reach out. We're happy to, we want as much representation from around the region as possible to get an understanding of kind of what's going on the ground. And yeah, thank you. I'm happy to take any questions, and this is my contact information.
I don't have any questions, but I would like to make a couple of comments. Get me on here. As most of you know, I'm the mayor in Batavia, and we are right now experiencing probably the fastest and largest population growth we've ever had. And I don't necessarily, I've been the mayor now for 44 years, so I should know what I'm talking about, but I really don't know what is the main reason we're getting this. There's a lot of older people want to move into our community, and we now have 6 senior living communities. This afternoon, I'm going back to town and we're going to break ground for a 7th. And we have right down the street from where this is going to occur, we've got 7 acres of land, which I have people talking to me about building an 8th. So we've got this huge population of seniors, and we've had a real problem. Our police department and myself are now out on a tour of all these communities because we're having a terrible time with all these folks being hoodwinked by people calling them up and giving them reasons why they need to donate money, or their tollway pass isn't working right, so give us your new credit card number, which is a total phony thing. And so that they can get their hands on the credit card number. So we got this, we're being very well received because there's been this terrible experience, but we got all these old folks in town, and I'm told that one of the biggest drives is that Batavia, where it is situated, we're in close proximity to 7 hospitals. And that seems to be a real attractive force for people of that age group, that there's all this hospital ability to be among them. And the other thing that I'm told is that we have a very good record of crime rate as far as volatile crimes or violent crimes. And that seems to be an attraction for all these folks to want to move in. But we're having some interesting numbers. And another place I'd really encourage you to go out and talk to is the northwest corner of Kane County. And that's Hampshire, Pingree Grove. I guess you could slip over into McHenry with Huntley. But that seems to have a huge population impact going right now. The mayor in Hampshire tells me that he's got 2,800 single-family home lots that have been annexed and zoned to Hampshire that have yet to be built upon. And so there's some numbers out there. There's places that this is being grown. The last thing I'd like to, I'm not gonna name names, but being the chairman of this council of mayors here, I get calls from a lot of other mayors in the region with different questions. And one of the questions I'm getting from some of the mayors is that there are certain population ethnic groups in the region that don't want to be counted. And like when the census takers were out on the street trying to get certain groups to come up and be counted, many of these folks ran away and hid or whatever and didn't want to give any information away. And I know, I'm not going to name them, but I know of several towns that have had a population drop. And they're telling me that it's all because the people were there, they got the people, but the people are hiding from afraid to be counted. They think it's going to put them in the focus with some government group and they're going to come for them or tax them or whatever the issue be. But that's a very predominant issue among some of my fellow peers, is this lack of certain groups that don't want to be counted.
Thank you, Alex. I'll invite Julie up to talk a little bit about the long-range planning process and how these two elements integrate into the regional transportation plan.
Good morning. Julie Reschke, she, her. I'm a policy analyst at CMAP. Today I'll be summarizing some existing transportation goals as we head into early discussions about the potential vision for the RTP. So last meeting, CMAP staff gave an overview of the purpose, timeline, and process for the RTP. And as the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for this region, CMAP must develop a long-range transportation plan every 4 years. In the past, the transportation plan was included in the comprehensive plans of GO to 2040 and On to 2050. Specifically in On to 2050, the transportation plan was included in the mobility chapter, financial plan, regionally significant projects, and relevant appendices. This coming up RTP will maintain the same 2050 horizon year and must be completed by October 2026 per federal guidelines. The purpose of the RTP is to be a forward-thinking plan that guides transportation investments, policies, and initiatives in Northeastern Illinois. And building on the vision established in On to 2050, the RTP will outline a transportation vision that aligns with broader regional goals and reflects the diverse needs and aspirations of communities throughout the region. The RTP development process is guided by 3 overarching questions. What is the future transportation system we want? What are the challenges and opportunities to get there? And how will we achieve the system that we want? Each of these questions are informed by different work streams within the RTP. For the first question, goals and objectives and the metrics associated with them will help identify the region's vision for transportation. Next, analyses of existing conditions and travel demand will articulate what's currently happening in the region, while the socioeconomic forecast, which we just heard about, and other analysis of future needs will provide insight to upcoming opportunities and challenges. And lastly, as goals, opportunities, and challenges are identified, the region can begin establishing how it will achieve its vision for transportation by analyzing and prioritizing capital investments, preparing a long-term financial plan, and setting strategies and implementation measures. It's important to note, thank you. It's important to note that some of these phases of work will happen continuously throughout the RTP development process. For example, the goal-setting phase that we are currently in will be fluid to account for new information we gain along the way through the socioeconomic forecast and analysis of existing conditions. This overview is, on the previous slide, the overview is merely intended to provide a high-level summary of how the different work streams in the RTP will come together in the final plan. Now ready, thank you. There are some federal and state requirements that are relevant for goal setting within the RTP. First, the RTP has to comply with federal goals, which are to improve safety, maintain a state of good repair, reduce congestion and improve reliability, improve freight movement, promote environmental sustainability, and to complete projects on schedule. And per state law, the RTP must also reflect the relationship between transportation and land use, economic development, air quality, and energy consumption. Additionally, the RTP must consider goals, metrics, and other details included in plans adopted by local governments and transit agencies. This is a task that staff have recently completed, which brings us to the next slide. So CMAP staff recently reviewed and summarized nearly 30 plans adopted by the federal government, state of Illinois, CMAP itself, county governments, transit agencies, and other stakeholders in the region. Included in your agenda packet is a memo detailing the process to review these plans and summarize common goals, objectives, and strategies. On the screen are the overarching goals that were identified through this plan review. Some examples are to increase mobility and accessibility, which speaks to objectives to manage congestion, support transit access, and invest in accessible infrastructure. There's also the goal to improve safety and security, which aims to promote safe travel, invest in infrastructure that improves safety, and centralize data on safety. And as a final example, we have preserve the existing system, which seeks to prioritize a state of good repair and maintain and expand funding opportunities for system maintenance. Reviewing plans adopted in the region revealed common themes across shared priorities. While not every plan includes each of the goals listed on the screen, the summary intends to broadly represent the overarching goals that guide transportation plans in Northeastern Illinois. The RTP is intended to be a plan for the whole region, where every community can see their interests and needs represented. Conducting this plan review was a crucial first step to begin understanding the transportation priorities set by diverse stakeholders in the region, which is a task that will continue through robust outreach and engagement throughout the plan's development. For more information about this summary, please refer to the memo included in your agenda packet. As stated previously, the RTP will build on the transportation vision set in ONDA 2050. The ONDA 2050 comprehensive plan was originally adopted in 2018 and updated in 2020. In the plan, the region achieved consensus on many transportation priorities, which are reflected in all 5 of the plan chapters. For today, we'll primarily focus on the mobility chapter, which sets a vision of a modern multimodal system that adapts to changing travel demand, a system that works better for everyone, and a region that makes transformative investments. By reviewing the foundation set in ONDA 2050, we have the opportunity to consider how the RTP could build off these goals. So the mobility chapter in ONDA 2050 set a broad range of transportation goals. Those goals include fully funding the region's transportation system, enhancing the approach to programming through more performance-based criteria and project evaluation, harnessing technology to improve travel and anticipate future impacts, and to improve travel safety. Additionally, the mobility chapter sets the goals of making transit more competitive, maintaining the region's status as a freight hub by improving the efficiency of our network and mitigating risks to nearby communities. There's also the goals to leverage the transportation network to promote inclusive growth or more equitable outcomes in local communities. And last but not least, there's the goal to improve the resilience of the transportation network to climate and weather. While ONDA 2050 goes into greater detail about actions that could implement each of the overarching goals that we previewed, the high-level summary represents topics where the region recently achieved consensus on transportation priorities. As we begin conversations about RTP goals, ONDA 2050 serves as a starting point to consider what the region's vision for transportation is today. Staying on this slide, as stated previously, the RTP will not be a plan that is just for CMAP. It's a plan for the whole region where all stakeholders will play a role. It's important that all communities in the region ultimately see themselves reflected in the RTP vision. And based on the current transportation plans in the region and recent progress achieving consensus in ONDA 2050, the region appears to envision a region that's fully funded, regionally coordinated, connected across modes, safe, efficient, and reliable, resilient to climate change, accessible, inclusive, and equitable, supportive of economies, and responsive to change and emerging technologies. As we begin considering goals for the RTP, we'll discuss how you would like to build off this foundation. Since 2050 was originally adopted in 2018, the region has made significant progress implementing its goals. All implementers, local governments, transportation agencies, transit providers, county governments, the state and federal government have made essential contributions to advance key transportation priorities. On the screen is just a snapshot of some of these efforts. The Rebuild Illinois funding package provided crucial support for transportation projects. The RTA's Transit is the Answer identified solutions to address the transit fiscal cliff, improve the passenger experience, and align transit with key goals like climate and equity. The Plan of Action for Regional Transit, or PART, identifies recommendations that can help the region invest in a stronger and more financially secure transit system. CMAP's Community Alliance for Regional Equity, also known as CARE, has sought to make our investment processes more equitable and strengthen community collaboration. The CREATE program has successfully secured funding and implemented projects that are crucial for the efficiency of the regional freight network. The RTA and CMAP have partnered on regional calls for projects to collaborate with municipalities to provide resources and important technical assistance. And last but not least, the Safe Travel for All Roadmap, also known as STAR, represents partnerships with county governments to develop safety action plans, advance safe street standards, and implement speed management best practices. While all of these efforts have been important for advancing the region's transportation priorities, they're just a handful of the immense amount of work that has been underway. As we head into discussion, it may help to reflect on transportation progress made in your community or within your agency, to consider if there's momentum the region should continue or any gaps that you would like to address. And to look ahead just a bit, as the region achieves consensus on the goals of the RTP, the conversation will ultimately shift to how you would like to implement the goals through efforts similar to those that were previously on the screen. These conversations on implementation strategies will happen and will take place a little bit later in 2025. And lastly, before we get into discussion, I'd like to preview some next steps. Throughout the summer and fall, the RTP team will be meeting with transportation stakeholders to have more detailed discussions about the vision and goals of the RTP. And later this year, CMAP will open a public survey to further inform the RTP vision and goals. In the near future, we'll also open an online portal where agencies, organizations, or individuals can submit materials they would like CMAP to consider for the RTP. And lastly, CMAP recently published a site where we'll post information and updates on the RTP. The link for that is included on the screen, but I believe there's also a one-pager included in your agenda packet, so the link should be there as well. Which brings us into discussion. So reflecting on the goals we reviewed as a part of the plan summary and the On to 2050 recap, we would love to hear your thoughts. Are the goals we reviewed still relevant to today's needs and priorities? Is there anything that's needed to move forward? And are there emerging or evolving issues that we should address in this RTP?
I'll start with the third one, the cybersecurity and terrorism. It shouldn't just be on the front. It should be over all of these goals and not forgotten. Just something to take into consideration.
Here we go. Cassandra Rouse, Illinois Tollway Executive Director. And I just wanted to just add on to the comment that Jim made about cybersecurity. As a tolling agency and the technology just embedded within our organization, we've just seen obviously throughout not just Illinois Tollway, throughout the tolling industry as a whole, cyber related attacks. And so I definitely think that it's important because many of not just tolling, but even transit, as we become more of a a technology, type organization, or in how we run our organizations and seek payments from our patrons and our customers, there are, attacks for all of us. And so I definitely think that we need to heighten cybersecurity efforts within all that we do.
Just on that vein, I'll mention that I was in DC for the Coalition for America's Gateways and Trade Corridors conversation, and the freight industry also is very concerned about cybersecurity and sort of critical attacks and whether or not that sort of infrastructure, the bridge in Baltimore, right? I mean, some of these things are new and on the horizon. So thanks for mentioning that. I think it also relates to what Mayor Schilke was saying about our aging population and how we protect them, and as we think about our infrastructure investments as well.
I would just say I served on the Pace Bus Board representing Kane County. And we are experiencing in Kane County a significant increase in bus ridership. And specifically where it's coming from is this senior living community thing that we have building in Kane County. We've never had the ridership that we have now. And we see a lot of them now wanting us to take the Pace bus and take them to the metro station. And so they can go on trips probably into the Chicago area. So things are working. It's certainly the COVID thing kind of slowed us down for a couple of years. But now that the perceptions are that's kind of gone away, these old folks want to get out. Thing. I've just got another thing I wanted to share with you here. Right now in Batavia, I'm about to, I guess, cut a ribbon to open up a Tesla car dealership on Randall Road in Batavia. And they bought, or they've acquired rights to move into now what has been a closed Sam's Club store in town. And they had a lot more room in this building than Tesla wanted, so we ended up having to compromise on our zoning ordinance to allow somebody to put a self-storage building at the back end of this Tesla store because we needed to fill the space, and we don't necessarily want self-storage in a prime retail space. But Tesla really wants to be there, and they told me that they had researched the area very strongly as to where the incomes were that could be attractive to a Tesla. And they said there's great parts of Chicagoland they probably wouldn't go into. But there are other parts that they really want to focus on and put themselves into. So you've got all these moving parts to all these conversations that it's not one answer, it's one with many answers. And this senior thing really seems to be a moving thing, because among those who have come into Batavia, we've had a lot of people relocate from Florida and the southern states, because most of it's I want to get near my grandchildren and my family. But there's others that have told me, well, I just think I like to change the seasons, and it's too much heat down there, or whatever the issues may be. But we do have some positive forces in Chicagoland that I think are having a fairly significant impact on both the bus and the train as far as moving things around. And I'm very pleased that we have CMAP in place to kind of analyze and identify these, because these are circumstances that are, those of us who are being faced with it, we got someplace we can turn and ask questions and find out what some of the better answers are. And that's certainly what I've been doing with CMAP here, is calling them and sharing my latest experience about what's happening in town with all these folks coming in.
One of the things I think we need to grapple with as we look to the next plan is sort of the transportation plan is very much capital focused in terms of sort of putting together a list of capital projects to sort of meet needs of the region. But I almost think about turning that a little bit on its end and thinking about it in terms of moving people and goods. And so sort of the responsiveness, the travel demand, what are the needs for movement of goods and resources around and people around our region, and using data to sort of drive that to then inform capital, but not sort of just be a list of capital projects. So I think data is going to be a very important piece of this, and sort of thinking about, as we look at sort of past plans, what's been successful in terms of delivering the outcomes we want, as opposed to just delivering a capital project. I know that's complicated, not always easy, but I think it's a way we really need to evolve. And I think it connects back to sort of some of the evolution of technology. And I don't mean just in the cybersecurity space, but I mean in sort of flexible work schedules, people working remotely, moving and traveling around our region differently. And how do we grapple with that as we sort of look more holistically at a comprehensive plan?
Anything else?
Just question, how does intercity transportation fit in? I'm thinking like Amtrak, but also bus. And I know it's been in the news lately that we're probably on the road to losing the intercity bus terminal that we have. So once that's gone, like, do we have a vision for how we're going to accommodate that in our region?
I can maybe get started. That is certainly something that we are planning to look at within the RTP as the many different modes that we have to consider within the plan. I'm not sure if Aaron or others have details as to how precisely what those plans look like at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been an important discussion that's been raised, right? It's an asset and it's a way that people move around the city. And so I think, again, like balancing, you've seen the agency over the years look at sort of big visionary projects to what the practical reality is. But I think back to Leanne's point here about if we're thinking about our objectives of getting people to where they need to go, I think that that sort of intercity bus terminal conversation does become part of the question, right? And, Jim and I serve on the state's high-speed rail commission that's happening right now. So again, I think that it's the short distance, it's the intrastate, and then it's sort of what are your day-to-day needs as well. So thank you for raising that. All right,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Then on to item 604, and that's the speed management report. And for that, we'll have Victoria. Barrett will provide an overview of the speed management report.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria Barrett. I'm a senior planner in CMAP's Regional Policy and Implementation Division. I'm here today to share an overview of a report released officially yesterday. It's now live on our website on a key issue in traffic safety, and that is speeding. This report is a result of many months of research, data analysis, and coordination with partners in traffic safety. We're thankful for all those partners, many of whom are here today. This speed report is part of our STAR program, which Julie just mentioned. A key focus of CMAP's traffic safety work is traffic safety work. And this is a 5-year effort to improve traffic safety throughout our region. The STAR program was launched in the fall of 2022 and is got many policy projects, planning projects, data analysis projects associated with it. The STAR program, and indeed the research report that was just released, is really guided by a new approach to addressing traffic safety, which is called the Safe System approach. It's how we organize our thinking about safety at CMAP and in line with the FHWA's thinking as well. It is a comprehensive approach to traffic safety that has taken some cues from the aviation industry's approach to safety. That means proactive safety. It means layers of safety, and it means that all participants in the activity are responsible in a shared way for the safety of the mission. The speed management report, which I'll give an overview of today, has a chapter about the current traffic safety crisis that's happening not only in our region and our state, but the country. It talks about the role of speed in traffic safety, why speeding is a threat, and then focuses on 3 chapters of key findings and recommendations that relate to different parts of that safe system approach wheel that you just saw. One is safe roads, that's improving roadway design. One is safe speeds, which addresses speed limit policies and laws. And then finally, addressing safe road users. So these are the most recent data of traffic fatalities in our region. After decades of decline, we saw, in alignment with the state and the nation, an upward trend in traffic fatalities starting around 2014. The reasons behind that are likely complex. I will talk a little bit about some of the key factors that might be at play there. Regardless of the reasons, the trend is concerning. And as many of you are aware, during the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a dramatic spike in the number of fatalities. And although numbers have come down slightly since 2021, thankfully, we are still above pre-pandemic levels in terms of traffic fatalities in our region. The trends are similar, by the way, for bicycle and pedestrian fatalities in our region. Another key aspect that's being included as we think about our safety work going forward is the equity issue that is at the root of traffic safety and how things play out on the ground. As you see on this graph here, the green line, the green bar shows the rate of Black residents in our region who are killed in traffic fatalities. They are overrepresented in this number, as are other communities of color. This is a key focus of the work as we try to understand what is happening. It is likely a combination of factors related to the safety of infrastructure and the amount of time and distance spent traveling by different racial groups. And it doesn't have to be this way. This is a look at traffic fatality as a public health risk, which is normalized by population. So when you think about our globalized risk towards in traffic safety, it's important to understand that United States numbers are double that of other peer countries. So Canada and Australia have fairly similar land use patterns and VMT per capita, yet their traffic fatalities per capita are much lower. So when we talk about speeding or exceeding a safe speed limit, or exceeding a safe speed, I should say, it's important to understand how does that play out in the overall fatalities and serious injuries in our region. And speed is a factor in about 46% of fatal crashes in our region. That number has ticked upward. Part of that is due to the way the data is collected. And just a note on the data, capturing speeding after a crash has occurred is not a perfect science. So we generally believe that speed is a factor in even more fatal crashes, but may not be indicated on every report. As we tried to understand how and where speeding is a risk, we looked at fatal and serious crashes by posted speed limit. So what that means is we located fatal and serious crashes on a map and then identified the posted speed limit where that crash occurred. What we found interesting about this finding is that the highest number of fatal and serious injury crashes are not happening neither in total numbers or by rate on our highways or our high-speed roads. It is on the roads with a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. So that is what's highlighted here in the red box. Roads with a posted speed limit, and posted speed limit does not mean the speed at which people are traveling, but it means the posted speed limit on the road. 30 miles per hour is the highest rate of crashes for both vehicles and cyclists and pedestrians, indicating that that's where some intervention is necessary. Another important thing to understand about speeding is that 30 miles per hour is a very important number when you look at the risk to a pedestrian who's traveling outside of a vehicle. This is a chart that shows the survivability rate of pedestrians at different vehicle speeds. So when a car is traveling 20 miles per hour, a pedestrian has a 95% chance of surviving that crash because of the lower speed. And I'll talk about why in a minute. At 30 miles per hour, a pedestrian has a 45% chance of being killed by that vehicle. And at 40 miles per hour, that number goes up to an 85% chance of a crash being fatal for a pedestrian outside of a car. So these numbers really matter. They really make a difference in the outcomes of crashes. And when we think about the roads with a posted speed limit of 30 miles per hour, here are some examples. These are complex environments. These are places where people are shopping, where children are attending school, where pedestrians are crossing the street, where cyclists share the lane with other types of vehicles. There are places with driveways and places where we're trying to attract people to businesses. So they are very complex environments. And as we are seeing, they are also quite dangerous. One of the more sort of instinctual things that people understand about speeding is that the faster you go, the longer it takes you to detect a hazard and bring a car to a stop. But this visual really puts that into a compelling image. So the faster you travel, the less you perceive of your environment. It's a cognitive function between, the optical inputs and your brain responding by basically kind of shutting off the side visuals as you accelerate and go faster. So what that means is that in these complex and urban environments that we were just looking at, is that cars driving 30 miles per hour are really not able to detect a lot of what's happening on the side of the roadway. So that could be a car pulling out from a driveway. It could be a ball rolling out into the street. It could be any number of hazards that really prevent a driver at 30 miles per hour from detecting it certainly in a quick way. This chart shows the power of speed management. So it is worth reducing speeds, and this means actually reducing the speeds at which all vehicles are traveling by just 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 miles per hour. So this chart shows these are calculated by crash modification factors in the Highway Safety Manual that show that when all cars drive just 1 mile per hour, lower than 30 miles per hour, you can reduce the risk of a pedestrian fatality by 17%. So this is an achievable goal. Small differences really do have big impacts here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about kinetic energy. If everyone remembers their last physics class, you might remember that this is the energy of movement. And kinetic energy is a major topic of conversation in the safe system approach to safety, because if we can manage the kinetic energy in crashes, we can reduce the severity of crashes. Kinetic energy is a function of both an object's speed and the weight of the object that is moving. And it is true, and this is one of the reasons why speeding has become more of a threat than it used to be, heavier vehicles deliver more kinetic energy at lower speeds than smaller vehicles. This quick graphic, this is based on EPA data about our vehicle fleet. It's important to understand that the types of cars we drive have changed a lot since 1975, when a lot of these laws and statutory speed limits were developed. In 1975, 81% of our vehicle fleet were sedans or wagons. Today, that number is just 26%, because most of our vehicle fleet now are larger SUVs, trucks, and minivans. These vehicles not only weigh more than the other vehicles, but they are also higher in profile. And recent research just released shows that higher profile vehicles striking other vehicles, as well as pedestrians and cyclists, are far deadlier. This is a chart that shows that kinetic energy graph that I was just kind of describing. And this is the important point to make here as we move towards a fleet that may be increasingly electric. Electric vehicles are actually even heavier than their gas-powered counterparts. The batteries tend to be quite heavy. So we actually calculated for the scientists in the room, the kinetic energy delivered by a Ford F-150 Lightning, which is the electric version of an F-150, a Jeep Grand Cherokee, and a Toyota Camry. And the point to make here is that a Toyota Camry at 30 miles per hour has a very similar kinetic energy to a Jeep Grand Cherokee traveling at 25 miles per hour, meaning the larger vehicles have to operate slower in order to constrain kinetic energy. And the science lesson is done now. So I want to talk a little bit about the key findings from our report, and hopefully get questions and comments from you all. We focused, as I mentioned, on 3 main activities. One is improving roadway design and capacity guidance to reduce speeding and exposure to safety risks. This means looking at new approaches to how we add capacity to our roadways. We know that the wider a street is and the more lanes there are, the faster people travel on them. So where we put those types of roads and how we design them really matters. Smaller streets, narrower lanes, planted medians, other traffic calming infrastructure are really effective at slowing down vehicle speeds. We want to improve existing design guidance and supports and standards to support compliance with speed limits. There is a new movement called a self-explaining roadway or a self-enforcing roadway that really uses design to change the driver's level of expectation on how fast it is safe to drive. We want to increase funding for speed management projects by updating our scoring metrics and also include project level design guidance. This really refers to our local technical assistance efforts to address speeding for locals, and we hear about that a lot. When it comes to speed limits, we're looking for ways to reduce speed limits in urbanized areas where people walk, bike, and use transit. These complex urban environments where these activities are happening and speeding is a particular threat. So there's statutory language that could be updated and improved related to reduced speed limits. There are also policies in place that we are already in the process of evaluating. Federal guidance has suggested moving away from the 85th percentile in urban areas, according to the new MUTCD, and we expect all other guidance to follow suit with that fairly soon. We want to reduce the risks posed by larger and heavier vehicles. How to do that is still being studied, but that is clearly a threat in our urban areas. And then locals do have the power in Illinois to reduce their speed limits by ordinance. It's not a perfect system, but it's something that we want to encourage locals to do where speeding is a threat. And finally, when it comes to creating safer road users, we want to support safe driving behavior with education and equitable enforcement practices. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned and showed, the safe system approach is something that is guiding our work, but actually integrating that into all of the transportation systems, decisions, funding mechanisms is something that will require some time and some effort and some changes in practices, but that's our #1 recommendation. We want to promote enforcement techniques that have a demonstrated benefit on driver behavior, that reduce speeds proactively through knowledge and information and advance our equity goals. We want to also improve the data that we need to understand and address speeding. We have a number of projects underway right now, including the Regional Speed Data Project, that are aimed to improve our understanding of speeding as a threat and deliver important data to our local partners. And finally, we want to create a framework for something called a traffic safety culture. There are many ways in which our education system, our enforcement system, the system of administration when it comes to getting driver's licenses can be improved to better leverage education in making our drivers safer. And that is a summary. I'm happy to take questions or comments.
Questions or comments for Vicki?
Yes. I'll make a comment. Cassandra Rouse, Illinois Tollway Executive Director. First, I want to just thank you, for the report. And at the Illinois Tollway, we are definitely taking this issue very seriously because, as you mentioned, this is a huge safety crisis for all of us. And we actually, starting next week, are going to be part of a national safety initiative where we are working with all the tolling agencies across North America and then globally as well. And we'll all be delivering the same message around this. And what's really important about this is kind of, as you mentioned, that the educational piece is something that we can do a greater job at doing. And so this initiative next week is so that we all across the U.S., across, globally are sharing the same message about, the statistics that you identified, that speeding kills and really has contributed to a large number of the fatalities, as you mentioned, almost 46%, is related to speeding. Even last week, we identified, not just speeding, but then it's also distracted driving. And when you highlight 30 miles per hour, if you're traveling on expressways and you're caught in congestion, the distracted driving piece is also adding to fatalities, where even last week we identified we had a patron that traveled right into the back of a semi and lost their life. So we're using the educational component underneath a campaign called Be Safe Together. And I encourage each of you that, are in the room and listening to join us in this Be Safe Together campaign. you'll see, advertisement around, the fatalities and bringing this to light across social media. We'll also have even involved our media partners across ABC, NBC, CBS, and others to join us in spreading the message. So, I thank you once again, because it's important not only that, we put this information out there, but also we're educating our young drivers. And every day next week, we have an initiative, focused, around all of the data statistics that you identified in your report. And we'll be accessing your report to actually enhance, some of that information to the public. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It's an indication we're all working on this, right? And one of the safe system approach would ask us to come together and really work together. So thank you for sharing that.
Kara Bader, CTA. I just want to thank you for the presentation, and I wanted to.
There's a microphone on.
Oh, it says it is.
Closer.
Thank you for the presentation, and I wanted to thank you for including the dimensions of vehicle size and weight in this conversation of speed and safety. And particularly, noting that as the size of vehicles has increased, and we know that we'll see a transition to more and more electric vehicles, that new vectors as it relates to speed and safety will continue to need to be addressed. And so looking forward to hearing more about recommendations that can come around vehicle design and weight as the health community and others start to think more proactively about planning for that transition. So thanks.
Thank you.
And it looked like Jim, and then I see Melinda has her hand up, so.
Yeah, thank you for reporting. Very complicated topic, but with the rise in the region going up, is that, my understanding, this is both vehicular, pedestrian, bike, it's all. Is there any one segment that's rising faster than the other?
Within the region, they're actually pretty much across the board going up among vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists. It changes when you analyze it at the state level a little bit, but at the regional level, they're all kind of on the same trend.
They're all going up.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with speed. Does any of it have to do with impaired drivers, specifically now that we have legalized drugs here?
Those are impaired driving and distracted driving are definitely part of what's at play here. Speed can help mitigate the impacts of those two issues, so that's an important factor. We'll be looking at topics like impairment and distracted driving as part of our safety action plans at the county level as we develop some policy briefs on other important traffic safety topics like those.
And I'll be interested someday to understand why certain countries have such lower numbers than us. What are they doing right or what are we doing wrong?
Yeah, there's no silver bullet. It's a great question, and it's one that we have dug into a little bit. Tighter and more controlled laws around safety. Most of those countries use automated speed enforcement quite broadly, and that is a very effective way to manage speeding. It has to do with vehicle size. Lots of those countries actually test their vehicles for the safety impacts to people external to the vehicle. The United States does not do that. So we think about the safety only of the person inside a vehicle when we give a 5-star gold safety rating. So there are a number of factors. It's complex. But talking about safety a lot is another topic, is another way to get at it.
And finally, the pre-COVID APTA did studies and says you're 18 times safer in a commuter train than you are on the road. So there you go, solution.
Yes, transit is the safest mode.
Speaking of transit, Melinda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was excellent. And, for pace, safety is always the #1 concern. And I agree with what Jim said. Transit's the answer. Hop on the bus and we'll get you there safely. But, it is our concern that the roadways are more congested and people are driving not as defensively. So anything that we can do to support your effort, including supporting the tollways effort, if we can advertise what you're doing on our buses for people who may use cars to get to our vehicles, we'd be happy to do that. This is a very important topic to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki.
Yeah. Now, into the legislative update. John Carpenter will provide an update, especially the recent legislative activities. John?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. My name is John Carpenter. I'm Director of Intergovernmental Affairs here at CMAP. It was an active legislative session. The legislative session went about 5 days longer than their scheduled adjournment, mostly because of budget negotiations and in each chamber. So it became quite complicated. As Aaron mentioned,
Could you move the microphone a little closer, John? Thanks.
as Aaron mentioned, the two pieces of legislation initiated by CMAP, the RPA modernization legislation, the Regional Planning Act modernization legislation, passed both houses and is on its way to the governor, while the Regional Planning Act funding appropriation remains stalled, and we'll continue to work on that. The governor has signed into law the $53 billion Budget Appropriation and Budget Implementation Act. While we are continuing to review the details of the FY25 budget and the Implementation Act, we do have one important transportation funding takeaway we thought you might be interested in. The RTA Act requires the road fund to provide $150 million to the Public Transportation Fund each year, plus the funds for the RTA debt service. The remainder of the PTF's annual funding has historically come from the general fund. The governor's FY25 budget proposal sought to increase the required $150 million transfer from the road fund to the PTF by $175 million, totaling $325 million. The final FY25 Budget Implementation Act instead increases the transfer from the road fund to the PTF by only $75 million for a total of $225 million. It also calls for $50 million from the leaking underground storage tank fund, the LUST fund, to be transferred to the PTF. Both the $75 million and the $50 million transfers included in the FY25 budget are one-time transfers to occur only in FY25. However, this sets a precedent for similar transfers in the future. The main takeaway here is that the transfers do not provide new revenues for transportation, but rather shift the funding burden from the PTF away from the general fund. This does not meet the transportation system's operating and capital needs at a time when additional revenues are needed and the long-term sustainability of existing revenue sources like the motor fuel fund continues to be at risk. I don't know if Leanne or the Secretary have any thoughts or comments on this legislation, but it's significant.
Not any thoughts other than, just reaffirm what you just said. This is not new money. A lot of people took it differently. It's merely shifting it from, the general JRF into the road fund.
Yeah, just echo that as well, because as I said, I think yesterday at the board meeting, many of our friends on the roadside thought we were taking the money. The other point that I just nuance, I will highlight, money was already coming from the road fund for transit, and it's an eligible expense under that. It's just an increase. It's a decrease of the amount coming from GRF, but now they're taking a little bit more from the road. That's all it was. And it's no additional revenue sources for transit.
In other legislation, both the House and the Senate passed House Bill 5511, the Procurement Omnibus Bill. One change of note included in this bill is the restoration of the MPO language stricken last session from the Public-Private Partnerships for Transportation Act. That requires transportation, any transportation facility developed under this act to be consistent with the regional plan of the MPO in whose boundaries the project is located. This is something we're working on late last session and then this session as well, and we were glad to see it restored. As you all know, at the end of April, the Clean and Equitable Transportation Act was filed. This is an omnibus bill that includes several different transit and climate provisions that would impact the region. The Metropolitan Mobility Authority Act offers a range of governance reforms, including consolidating the RTA and the service boards into one entity to manage transit in the region. As we shared at our last meeting, we think it's important to maintain the three-legged stool approach that we took in the PART report as the focus now shifts to legislative action. The General Assembly will be holding subject matter hearings on this and other issues this summer related to transit operations, funding, and governance. We will be happy to share more details on the hearings as we learn of them. Also included in the omnibus bill is the Transportation Choices Act, which would set a statewide GHG greenhouse gas target for the transportation sector and detail several steps MPOs and IDOT would need to take to ensure that the regional transportation plan and the TIP are in compliance with these targets. As you know, we have a lot of work underway right now here at CMAP that will help us accelerate emissions reductions from the transportation sector between the CCAP development and C2C scenario planning effort. We agree that more tools are needed to reduce emissions from transportation, and we'll be providing more specific feedback to ensure that the implementation levers included are appropriately aligned with our federal requirements as an MPO. CMAP continues to track other legislation before the General Assembly and legislation that's been enacted in this past session. And staff, we've included a list of that legislation in your packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. So on to item 7, which is, there any other business before this committee? Any other business? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make one quick note that our team will be reaching out to organizations just to make sure that we have our alternates lists up to date for you all. So just a highlight that you'll receive a contact from our staff just to make sure that we've got everybody listed.
Perfect, thank you. Anything else? On to then public comment. We'll take comment from the public, from the individual who are here in audience first, then we'll follow that with remote participation. Any other comment from the public who are here? Seeing none. Any comments from the public who are remotely participating? Garland, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Yes, sir.
Secretary Osman, how you doing?
Good to hear from you. Good to hear from you.
It's Garland Armstrong, formerly of Des Plaines, now living in Des Moines, Iowa. I just want to give kudos to those, especially taking the person safety thing across the nation, especially for people who cannot speak clear English, especially when they're driving recklessly and then they want to start a road rage. That's why they need to be educated on what will happen next if the unthinkable happens. So they need to stop and think of themselves why they're doing it and why they hurt another person and leaving the scene of an incident. So just make sure about that. So they need across the nation about that. Why reckless drivers are hitting someone, like you said, the scene of an accident, hitting someone and leaving the scene of it. So they'll be one day get part of it. So they need to be well educated in different languages, and they need to do it right away as soon as possible. And also too, I'm concerned too, like if one of the inner city things like the Amtrak or like the Burlington Trailways affiliate with Greyhound leaves, we need to make sure that we need to know nationwide, the inner city area, how to make sure that we can adapt it. So, like, for example, when we come back again, either on Burlington Trailways or Amtrak, a year or two, how they can make sure to implement it and work out a creative, comprehensive idea on how to make sure to keep it going for years to come. Because if that is going to be a big concern, then flying would be the alternative. And there are some who cannot even fly at all. And how to get the power wheelchair, on board the plane. So that's all I have to say. And I'll be glad to answer any comments or questions you got.
Thank you, Garland. I see no questions here, but we do appreciate your comments.
Okay.
Thank you, appreciate it. Just as a reminder, if anyone want to leave a written comment, we'll take those, and there are sheets outside, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. With that, the next meeting will be a joint meeting with the CMAP board and is scheduled for Wednesday, October 8th, 2020.
Can I just jump in? I think
Yeah,
that's
please.
supposed to be October 9, Wednesday's the 9th, I believe. if I'm
We're only off by a day.
Oh. We typically pick the Wednesday board. Wednesday's the. Yep, Wednesday, the 9th, October 9th. Thank you.
Right. So with that last item. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Shelkey moves.
Thank you. All in favor? All opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.